Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for June 16th, 2025. Well, we're seeing the same pattern that we've seen over and over and over again. Lies being put out there to justify war. Remember the lies about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction? Well, we went into a costly war based on those lies. And those lies came from British intelligence, and they were also laundered through the U.S. intelligence community, from MI6 and Tony Blair to the CIA and the National Security Agency. And it was the neocons in the U.S. intelligence community who used them as the basis for launching a war against Iraq, which was enormously costly in terms of lives and money. Now, these same networks were the ones responsible for the repeated lying about Russiagate, about Putin's alleged plan to conquer Europe. And now we have lies about Iran's intention. We're being told, despite all evidence to the contrary, including one report after another from the U.S. National Security Council and the Director of National Intelligence, we're being told over and over and over again that Iran may be weeks away from developing nuclear weapons. And one of the big liars pushing this is Benjamin Netanyahu, who wants to continue the wars because he's afraid otherwise he's heading to jail on corruption charges. So more and more lies pushing us toward new wars. Now, these are also coming from the same network of the Netanyahu government, which is engaging in war crimes in Gaza and in the West Bank. Now, why is it that these lies aren't being challenged? Certainly people in the National Security Council in the United States know that these are lies. Certainly people in the military know we're being lied to. Probably President Trump also knows we're being lied to because he doesn't trust the U.S. intelligence community. So why are governments committing themselves to a course which could lead to nuclear war based on the same old lies? Now, we know that President Trump has been pushing for negotiations with Russia to end the war in Ukraine, and also negotiations with Iran to make sure that Iran does not build a nuclear weapon. Well, the Iranian government has said repeatedly they do not intend to build a nuclear weapon, but if they're continuously brought under attack, they may feel there's no option to protect themselves but to build a nuclear weapon. So they're making the inevitable a self-fulfilling prophecy if they continue with this kind of attack against the Iranian government and people. Take note of the fact that on the eve of the next round of negotiations that were scheduled, both in Istanbul with Ukraine and Russia, and then in Oman between the U.S. and Iran, it was on the eve of those negotiations, that is the day or two before that, that the fighting escalated. The Ukrainian attack on Russian airfields, the terrorist attack on Russian infrastructure, was a couple days before the next round of talks in Istanbul. And right before Netanyahu launched his attacks on Iran, there were scheduled talks in Oman between the United States and Iran. So obviously someone decided to sabotage the negotiations. Why? Because they wanted this war or these wars to occur and to continue. It looks like unless something changes in Europe, there will be a long war between Russia and Ukraine, and not only Ukraine, but eventually NATO will be brought in, given the stupidity of the Eurocrats running the European side. And Netanyahu is talking about a long war to essentially carry out regime change in Iran. And he's, more importantly, as he's going to run into increasing troubles succeeding in this war to overthrow the Iranian government, he's turning to the United States demanding that the U.S. help him carry out his mission. This is something called the breakaway ally scenario, which we identified many years ago, excuse me, as part of the Wolfowitz doctrine that was designed to create a war between Israel and Iran, which Israel could not win, so they'd have to call in the United States. And in fact, that's what's being discussed now. The U.S. must come in to make sure that Iran is defeated. Trump is saying he's not going to do it. Well, the question is, what will Trump do? But more importantly, let me ask this. What will you do? What will you do to make sure that the United States does not go into another series of wars that will be costly in lives and money, but more importantly, could escalate to thermonuclear confrontation? It's worth noting that Trump and Putin did talk last weekend, a 50-minute discussion where, among other things, Putin offered to help mediate with Iran. Now, the Schiller Institute has put out an emergency statement, and it's appended in the description section of today's update. It's titled, "It's Not Too Late to Avoid a Doomsday Scenario in the Middle East." And the central point is the United States must intervene to end the fighting. And that means in collaboration with Russia and with China. And the target of these collaborations should be the establishment of a new security architecture tied to a new economic development architecture, so that we not only end the wars, but actually have the basis for a sustainable peace in the cooperative economic policies for mutual benefit. So I want you to download and circulate the leaflet. Read it and circulate it. And when you contact your legislators and other officials, emphasize the importance of the new global strategic architecture, which includes cooperation of the U.S. with China and Russia for mutual security. It includes the need for infrastructure development. For example, the Oasis Plan to provide fresh water to the region that's currently in conflict in Southwest Asia. And also to resolve the nuclear issue with Iran with an agreement for a regional enrichment process that can be monitored very closely to avoid any attempt by Iran to build their own nuclear weapons. So that the point is we have to establish a new global security architecture. That's the key. And as my associate, Dennis Small, pointed out in a written briefing yesterday, he said, firefighting is needed, but the arsonist must be stopped. In this case, the arsonist is the war hawks that run the city of London and the U.S. military-industrial complex that work on behalf of the private corporate cartels looking out for their interests, not for yours. Who's looking out for your interests? Well, the president's supposed to. The Congress is supposed to. I think we can write off the Congress as a bunch of idiots, a bunch of people on the payroll of the corporate cartels and the military-industrial complex. What about President Trump? He needs to make sure, if he really is serious about peace, that he have the proper strategy. He identifies who the enemy is, he tells them to cut it out, and he rallies the support of those countries that are prepared to take on this enemy. And that includes Russia, China, India, Brazil, and many nations of the global south. The U.S. neocon network must be stopped, but most importantly, the British Empire, the geopoliticians of the city of London, have no right to dictate policy to the world, and certainly no right to dictate it to the United States. And as a patriotic nationalist, President Trump must stand up to say no more British wars, no more imperial draining of our treasury. We need peace. We need a new security and development architecture, which will benefit all countries, which is actually the way that you end the dangers that are